everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Red Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Coltin Schachtner, and today I have two very familiar faces. I have Tom Stanton, head of REDSTAR Brandon, and John Person, our head agronomist. How's it going, guys?
It's going good. It's a little warm outside, but that's good for the corns.
Yep, I issued a fat man alert at 9:30 this morning, so it's a warm, humid one out.
Yeah, we swam our way all the way from Sioux City today.
It took a long time to get here, I might add.
That it did. So, guys, what we've seen here recently, and it's been coming for a while, but the prices of our inputs, especially MP and K, have gone through the roof compared to last year. So one of the things I want to talk about, that it's a product we've been using for years, and this year the effects of it have become worth even more, and that's breakdown. So Tom, can you give us just a little bit of an overview of, one, what breakdown is, and two, how we're helping the grower achieve better profitability by using breakdown?
Yeah, absolutely, Colton. So, there's been a lot of products in the marketplace for the last 4 or 5 years that have focused on, residue digestion, okay? Taking that complex carbon in a corn stalk, put some bacteria out there and breaking it down and help release those nutrients, okay? And we looked at that and said, okay, can we build a better mousetrap? And so what we have done is we've taken 3 different forms of carbon, plus a very balanced bacterial and fungal product, and put it with some fertilizer, right? Some sulfur and some nitrogen, and applied that to these corn stalks that are out there, corn on corn situation, or even a corn going back to soybean situation, and said, hey, can we improve and make it more efficient for those microbes to do their work and break down more fertilizer? And so that's where the breakdown product came from, was trying to improve on what's out there in the marketplace.
Perfect. So, John, can you tell us just a little bit of what you've seen in the field from breakdown over the past couple of years?
Well, one of the things that are probably the main thing to me is residue breakdown, the fact that it becomes more manageable. And if you apply it in the fall, the spring is a lot more manageable. And that really just tells you that it's getting into the biosystem quicker, better. I'm going to create organic nitrogen and release phosphorus and those type of things that we're seeing some differences in. The last couple of years we've had plenty of rain, and we see leaching, and this is really helping us with some of those issues as far as some breakdown early.
Yeah, that's a really good point, John. One of the big differences, Colton, in our breakdown versus the other products on the marketplace is the biological that we're using has been tested. It's been proven to reduce the loss of nitrate by up to 49%, okay? Now, does that mean it's going to be 49% every year? No, it doesn't. But it's very noticeable when we get into some fields, especially this year, where we're seeing places that are 10, 12, 14 inches above the 10-year average, and we're able to help hold that nitrogen in that root zone longer.
Yeah, definitely, especially this time of year when we start to see the firing of the leaves, you can start to tell where it was applied.
Also, the water holding capacity, when we talk about water holding capacity and organic matter, the form the organic matter in is extremely important.
Yes.
It's not a corn stalk. It's more of the humus and
right.
the smaller organic matter. Therefore, we don't have the leaching as readily, and we can just hold more water, which is not as important this year, but on a drier year, it really is.
Definitely. And one thing that's very interesting, even with all the rain we got last fall and this year, all 3 of us have been in fields where you cut those stalks open and it looks like it was harvested last week. So even with the moisture, we still haven't gotten amazing residue digestion. So it just shows how important it is to put something out there to actually return those fertilizer dollars. And speaking of fertilizer dollars, Tom, we've done the math today, and it's very impressive how much it is. But can you tell everybody how much, according to our study, roughly it was for dollars returned to the farmer? Yeah.
Last year, 2024, when we actually did the work with Regen Labs out of Pleasanton, Nebraska, it was $163.37 of fertilizer that we released back to the soil. And I might add, that's carbon-based fertilizer, so it's available. This year, with where nitrogen is up, phosphorus is up, potassium's up, that's now $182.87 an acre. So a little over 11% increase in 2026 versus 2025.
And the numbers didn't change of what we released. That stayed the same.
Stayed the same.
It's just the fact that fertilizer went up. It created that much more value.
Yeah, just an example. If I use the same fertilizer analysis on my farm in 2026 as I did in 2025, it's $51 an acre higher for the same N, the same P, the same K.
And one of the things about the breakdown is the nutrients are so much more available. They're in a better form. If we just put MAP out there for an example, we lose a lot to efficiency, and this really helps that efficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the things, John, we were just in a field here a couple weeks ago that was corn on corn on corn on corn, and this particular grower used breakdown and has been using breakdown for a couple of years. And I think it was been corn on corn for 15, 18 years. You looked out there and you're like, so this has been corn on corn for 15, 18 years? It's that dramatic of a difference that you can see after a couple of years of using the product.
Definitely. And you and I were walking a field. Now, this was sprayed in the spring, and it's soybeans following corn. And I don't think I've ever seen two people like us get that excited before walking beans. That was amazing.
It was. And when you look at the nutrients that you're releasing, right? And let's face it, I'm guilty of it. Most growers are guilty of it. We focus on corn.
Yes.
And we forget about that soybean crop, right?
The most popular cover crop.
It is. It's a popular cover crop. And what we've seen, and thank goodness for our customer who brought it to our attention saying, hey, you got to come look at these beans. You know, my farm manager says are the best beans he's seen this year. We go out and look at it, and we're kind of in awe. And then we looked back at the program we gave him, and we're like, yeah, we just released a whole bunch of nutrients for those soybeans that historically, you know, you don't put any fertilizer on.
And that's one thing about soybeans is they can't produce enough nitrogen on their own to grow much more than 50 or 60 bushels of soybeans. So they rely a lot on what is being given to them naturally, broke down from the year before or carryover, and this really helps that. So it should give us more nitrogen to our soybeans late in the year.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And when we did the math, it was a double-digit difference for the amount of nitrogen potential. Combine will tell us the final results, but the potential for that nitrogen release was double-digit yield increase potential.
Right. And, you know, if you could put looks in the bin, it would be
It'd be amazing.
Yeah, I hope it turns out that way. It's going to depend on the rest of the summer, right? How much rain we get, the heat, make sure those soybeans finish, but definitely something we want to take a hard look at next year.
Definitely. So when we talk about breakdown, I believe the application is as important as the product. So how do we want growers to apply this, both the method of application and when do we want to apply it?
Absolutely. You know, let's take that field, John, a couple weeks ago we looked at. Let's say you're in a long-term corn-on-corn situation. In that situation, a fall application will be a huge benefit to you, okay? You get the combine out there, you run it through it. If you can get out there as soon as you can and spray a gallon of breakdown on, like to see a minimum of 10 gallons of water. But you know what? We've done it with drones too, at 2 to 3 gallons of water and seen really good results. But in the fall, the faster you can get it out there and start that breakdown of that complex carbon. So then as you head into spring, you've just got to jump start. Now, does that mean if I apply it till spring that I'm going to give something up? Yeah, probably a little bit. But as we have seen, even applying it in the spring, say I put it with my 32% in my herbicide program, again, we're still unlocking those nutrients, especially late season. What you probably won't get is that benefit of what we saw a year or so ago when we did the work. I think we lost, Colton, 3.4 tons of residue from a fall application to the spring?
Yes.
So that right there, to me, is a big deal, especially if you're in a no-till situation or in a corn-on-corn situation. You can better manage that residue with a fall application versus in the spring.
Absolutely. And you touched on it already, but the point I like to make is if you spray it early in the spring, don't expect the residue to just disappear by the time the planter rolls.
Absolutely.
It does take time. And I think that point, following the combine out of the field, even though we have carbon in the product, we can't replace the tons of carbon out there in the field.
Right, exactly. And let's face it, every day we're losing 3 to 4 minutes of daylight. Okay, it's been very noticeable to me. As we get into September, October, and November, our days are really short. Temperatures cool off. So the faster we can get it out there, the more benefit those fungi and bacteria can do their work yet this fall.
They just have longer to live, in the fall, and they will overwinter in the soils. And but if we can get their numbers multiplied in the fall, it helps greatly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Anything else that anybody needs to know about breakdown? Use it.
Again, I've been using a version of it for many years on my own farms, and have just seen great results with it. And one thing as you get into longer term use, and this was actually a question, Colton, you and I had this morning from a customer, is, how does that impact my soil test, right? If I put it on the fall and I comes back in the spring and I soil test, is that going to affect my soil test? And I can say from doing it on my own farm, absolutely it's going to. You will see a difference. And the best way is to test your soil this fall and then come back next spring and test it again. And, if we have really good moisture through the winter, some rain, some snow, you'll see a difference in your soil test.
And I know soil health, that word is kind of a buzzword, and it's very broad, but it does help overall soil health with just the way it starts things to come together, become more balanced.
Yeah, absolutely. And this whole regenerative agriculture thing, I'm a huge fan of it. Doing some of those things on my own farm, and anytime we can increase that humus amount, which leads to more organic matter in our soil, we're just going to have healthier crops down the road.
Absolutely. Perfect. Well, thank you guys. And we're going to take a short break here and roll into another product. All right, so we're back from the break, and we're here to talk about our new product, PK Plus. So, John, this is a very long story of how we got here, but can you give the background of how we ended up today at PK Plus?
Well, how far back do you want to go?
Oh, I guess as far as we need to.
PK Plus is, we had polysulfate. Polysulfate is a sulfate form of, potassium, some calcium, magnesium, and sulfates are always better. We've done work with, in the past, ammonium sulfate, how it releases things, potassium sulfate, and now we have this polysulfate, and the polysulfate has now come into being PK sulfate. So that's
kind of really where we got started was 2 or 3 years ago, where you were like, okay, we got potassium chloride, right? Potash, that everybody knows. And then there's something called sulfate of potash, 005017 sulfur. And you did a little experiment with a couple of your customers. And, you used, I can't remember what the rate was, but 200 pounds of potassium chloride, potash, and used a half rate of the potassium sulfate. And the potassium sulfate was 10 to 25 bushels better. And, salt index and having the sulfur. So I think that's where it really started. And then, that kind of led into the polysulfate, which is, potassium, sulfate of potash. And then you've got some magnesium, some calcium, along with the sulfur with it. And we've seen just great results with it.
And they're all in the sulfate form. And I think a lot of times we underestimate the forms of product we put on. Phosphate. Well, phosphate ties up with calcium. The more we put out there, the more calcium it ties up. We need calcium. So are we doing ourselves discredit by applying some of the phosphates we do? And this addresses some of those issues.
It does. We mine calcium phosphate in Florida, right?
Yes.
And then we break it apart. We pull the calcium and the phosphorus apart. They make DAP, 18460, or they make MAP, 11520. They ship it to us on trains in the Midwest. We apply it back to the soil. And we've got such high calcium soils, the next thing you know, we've got calcium that ties up the phosphorus we apply.
So they should just ship us rock phosphate anyway.
They should just mine it and ship it to us, and same result.
Well, and then the process products cost more.
They do.
For what you're getting, and you undo a lot of the value of the product by the manufacturing process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know when ICL brought us the PK Plus. I'm not sure they brought it to us. We actually found out that they had something, and then they got it registered in the U.S. And so we said, "Hey, what about this product?" And it's 24. It's a 0.24/6, 15% calcium, 1.8% magnesium, and 9% sulfur. I mean, that's just
0.24/6. Well, 52 is a lot more than 24. So wouldn't that be better for phosphorus than an 0.24?
allegedly.
More is better, right?
More is better, right? The moron story, John.
Yeah. But it's really all about availability. It's 100% about availability in this situation. Our soil is extremely high in phosphate naturally. It's just unavailable. And when we add more of a phosphate that is unavailable, we just add more to the problem. And this is available. It's in, like I said, it's in the sulfate form. We got the calcium. Calcium is available. It doesn't have to bind with the phosphates like we do when we just throw phosphate out there, or 1152O or 1846O. Those are not as available. They're water soluble, but they're just, the sulfate form is better. It's the acidity.
Yeah, they're not protected, and with the calcium sulfate and the magnesium sulfate, that sulfate ion is protecting it, so that phosphorus is available. It's tying the calcium and magnesium up that really want to, tie up that phosphorus, but it can't because of the sulfate molecule. And so I think it's an ingenious product that they developed. One of the things that I like about it is, if you look at DAP, it's a high pH. If I look at MAP, it's a really low pH. When I look at PK Plus, it's neutral. It's like baby bear porridge. It's just right, and I think that's important in our soils, right? Because we fight too low pH, too high pH. This is really just right, and it's in the most available phosphorus form that, as you said, John, it's protected, and so when you apply it, that phosphorus, it's going to be 100% available.
And the thing, too, with the high and low pH, where we're from, you'll find high pH and low pH within 100 foot of each other.
Yeah, very much so.
And you also talked about what gives with the 24 versus 52. Well, the simple numbers are, and we've known them for a long time, that 1152O can be somewhere between 20 and maybe 40% available. It just is not available. But not only is it not available, but it ties up other products. Mm-hmm. And therefore or other elements. Therefore we do a negative with a good. And this is all available. So 24 is more than 52.
Okay.
Yeah, and the nice thing that I like, Coltin, about the PK Plus is it's balance, right? Mm-hmm. And I think when you look at agronomy so many times, balance is so important. We talk about balancing our soils, right? Making sure we get the pH balanced. Then we talk about, the calcium to magnesium ratio in the soil. We want to get it balanced, because when it's balanced, you maximize nutrient availability. And I think PK Plus is one of those products. Yep, it's new to the market, but with our experience with polysulfate and what we saw mixing that with MAP last year to help make the MAP more available, now we've got homogeneous prill all in one. To me, that just, it makes a lot of sense.
Perfect. So when we're looking at application, let's say a normal guy is putting out 100 pounds of MAP, so about 52 pounds of phosphorus. Where do we want to set that rate for the PK Plus? Are we matching pound for pound, or do you feel like we can maybe knock off 10% or so?
If you do the math, or just what you think is available in the MAP or the DAP, let's just use a 40% number or a 35% number. Well, if you're putting out 100 pounds of phosphate, 35% is 35 pounds. But if we go to a product that is available, that's 24%, it would be close. I mean, you could do the math, figure it out. 120 pounds, it just depends on what your program is, what your starter is. Do you have any other forms of phosphate? Your manure. But one thing we don't haven't talked about is the calcium. We have calcium in the PK Plus, and calcium is so important
Absolutely.
where you can't compare 100 pounds of MAP to 100 pounds of PK Plus because you're getting all these other nutrients, the calcium, the potassium, and the sulfur.
Right.
There really just isn't a fair comparison. I think those are numbers that need to be talked about, this winter of what we're going to do.
Yeah, and I think, our plan going out would be, we're going to run out and use 200 pounds an acre of PK Plus in place of that 100 pounds of MAP, right? And so that's going to get you almost spot on in terms of the amount of phosphate that you're going to get in. But as John just said, we're talking something that's going to be 100% available versus something that at best is going to be 35%. But, we're going to do the right thing. We're going to go out there with 200. But again, then we're going to get the potassium that goes with it, the sulfate of potash in the sulfur form, the calcium, the magnesium, and then that 9% sulfur, which I think is going to be huge for our customers.
And I think the important thing to talk about with the sulfur too is sulfur. We typically think of it, we put it out there, it's available, and then if we get a big rain, it's gone. But the nice part about the sulfur in this product is it's almost like a slow release sulfur.
It is.
Where it takes time to become available.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that John has talked about forever is calcium and the benefits of calcium. And, typically speaking, when we talk about calcium, we're adjusting our pH, right? We're putting calcium carbonate or lime iron. We got to get that pH higher. Or if I've got a higher pH, we put gypsum, right? Which is what? It's calcium sulfate. And what it really is, it's an available form of calcium because, we have got thousands of pounds of of calcium in our soil, but most folks don't understand we can't really pull that efficiently. And so even just something like, PK Plus at 15% calcium, that's a huge deal.
This is the difference between feeding the plant calcium and adjusting the pH. Those are two different subjects.
Absolutely. Yeah. And let's face it, calcium is the backbone for all the nutrients.
Absolutely.
Okay? All the nutrients have to go through calcium to get into the plant. And so by having an efficient, available source of calcium out there is just going to help drive the uptake of everything. N, P, K, sulfur, zincs, micros.
Definitely. Yeah, calcium, we've talked about it a lot with all of our different products, but it seems to be that's always one of the most important for everything we do, and the fact that we have it and it's not tying up our phosphorus, that is a great way.
It is.
Perfect. Anything we missed on PK Plus?
I'm sure there is something, but
Application methods, how are we applying it?
What do you think, John? What's your favorite way when you look at PK Plus from an application standpoint?
it would be a fantastic product in furrow, or not in furrow, but in the band with a strip till unit. Just fantastic, because the salt level would be down.
Yes.
You wouldn't have to worry about any negative effects of that. Other than that, we will need to broadcast.
Perfect.
Yeah, I my strip till this fall, I'm going to try to get some PK Plus in my strip till. To me, I agree with you. I think about putting that 6, 7, 8 inches, and just the benefits that we're going to get at that level to have an actual available form of phosphorus, especially, again, I look at the nutrient demand curve, right? And phosphorus, largest demand is at tassel time. And so strip till down 6, 7, 8 inches. When we get there, it's going to be great to have an available form of phosphorus that corn plant can tap into.
And it will be some free calcium there also with it.
Absolutely.
Which is really important.
Perfect. Well, we're going to take another break and come back for one more product. All right. Well, we're back from the break now, and we've been talking all day about how expensive fertilizer is. So can you guys talk about MAGNATRIO and how that is going to help growers who have to pay this high price for fertilizer make more use out of what they buy?
Yeah, absolutely. Little background on MAGNATRIO. So there's a lot of what we call nutrient use efficiency products in the market. Okay, there's some really good biological type products that get impregnated on phosphorus and potassium and help their availability. And then there's some other chelators or polymers, right, that you can also put on the same P and K, and those polymers work differently. You know, they're going to basically help protect that negatively charged phosphorus from tying up with the calcium and the magnesium. And as we looked at building MAGNATRIO, I'm like, well, I don't just want this one, or I just don't want that one. I want both. And so what we did is we went out and we got one of the best polymers on the market, and we got one of the best biologicals on the market. And so with MAGNATRIO, you know, you've got your key enzymes and organic acids, and then you've got your polymer, hence the name trio. You've got three things that can go to work for you as a grower to help, you know, make that fertilizer more available. And then when you make it more available, let's chelate it or protect it from tying back up in the soil to where it won't become plant available.
Perfect. So, John, in the past, what have you seen as results from using MAGNATRIO on, let's just say, MAP or potash?
Well, to me, the main thing is you know, you're gaining soil health, you're gaining availability, you're gaining the breakdown, and that's all done naturally. It isn't chemically driven, so that helps our soil health. And one of the things that we don't think about is what kind of gains in yield did we have when we started treating our seed? They were good. I mean, we treated it with different things. Why haven't we treated our fertilizer? It's just the smart thing to do to make our fertilizer more available, to make it get into the plant, and that's where this comes into play.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we can, you know, MAP, DAP, potash, PK plus, whatever. We can impregnate it with MAGNATRIO. Then as we put those granules on our soil, you know, we broadcast them, you know, wherever they land, you know, we then have that ability to influence the soil biology, you know, where that granule or prill lands. You know, let's increase that biological breakdown to break that fertilizer down faster. And also at the same time, if I've got good soil fertility, that biology is going to help unlock that and make it more available too. And then, you know, then you've got the other part of the MAGNATRIO, and then it's like, okay, once we release it, wow, now let's keep it plant available, keep the calcium, keep the magnesium, you know, away from it and tighten it up.
And I think that's an important part too, because when we apply a MAP or DAP, it does have to be converted to be used by the plant. Where if we can put something on it to convert it for us, well, that's that much less our soil has to do in the spring.
Absolutely. You know, the root when it encounters calcium phosphate in the soil, you know, it has to extrude all those organic acids, you know, separate that calcium, separate that phosphorus, and then, you know, through the microbial process, the rhizosphere, then it brings them into the root system. Here, we're just basically helping to eliminate that step. So put it in that form that it can just take up right now.
And we're enhancing the soil. It's not just a short-term thing. Where we change the soil in that small place around that prill, it's like breakdown. It helps that soil long-term become better. It will release in years to come. It will help the health of the soil.
Absolutely. So we talk about using it on potash, and people might be going, well, wait, potassium's already in a plant usable form. So how does apply MAGNATRIO help us utilize that potash?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, it kind of depends where you're at. One of the biggest issues we have, and especially let's talk about the Western Corn Belt, okay? Say west of I-35 that goes north and south across, north and south Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri. You know, west of there, you know, we tend to have some tighter soils, and that potassium, even though it's only a single positive charge, it kind of gets pushed around and told where to go. And if it gets in between some of those clay particles, it kind of gets bound and tied up. And so you've got to figure out a way to help, you know, kind of get it back, you know, unattached, so to speak, so you can become plant available.
And biology is one of the main principles to get the potassium out of those colloids, especially after dry years. Now, we haven't had that for a couple years, but we did a couple years previous, and that tied up some of our potassium, and this will help get some of that break some of those colloids apart and release it so it's available.
Absolutely. And you know, where we're at in Nebraska, the high plains is what it's considered, we naturally have a lot of potassium in our soil. Pull it up on a soil test, but you know, you go do something like a Haney test or one of our RX 360s, and all of a sudden you go, well, it's there, but is it really plant available? And that's where something like MAGNATRIO or breakdown can actually help, you know, release and make that potassium available.
Perfect. So how much MAGNATRIO are we putting on a ton of fertilizer?
You know, historically, we've been running that 2 to 3 quarts per ton of fertilizer. And by doing that, we get excellent coverage. So it's going to hit every granule or every prill that's in there. And then as you spread it, again, wherever it lands, we're going to influence the biology in that area and just help to break down that prill faster to unlock it and make it available, and then also protect it at the same time.
So if I'm putting a liquid on a dry fertilizer, can I still run it through a strip till rig?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We, you know, in those situations, you know, we always jar test and do those things ahead of time to say, okay, you know, if we're doing a DAP and a polysulfate blend, you know, we're always going to make sure that it's worked, that it's not too wet. But yes, you can definitely do that in a strip till situation with dry.
We don't use urea in a band in a strip till. If maybe a little bit, if any, that is not a place for this product. It is
Right.
more used on phosphates, potassiums, anything of that nature.
Absolutely. Yep. Urea would be a little difficult for it to put on unless you've had P and K that's going with it.
Correct.
But yeah, if you're going to go on straight urea, it's probably not the product that any of us would choose.
Okay, perfect. So is there anything else we should cover with MAGNATRIO?
Yeah, I mean, it's not selective. It's going to work with macronutrients. It's going to work with micronutrients, and it's also going to work with secondary nutrients. So, you know, I think of elemental sulfur. Okay, elemental sulfur is not available until it gets completely oxidized into sulfate, and you know, that's a biological process. You know, by using MAGNATRIO and the biology that's in it, things like elemental sulfur, it's just going to help speed that process up so you can, you know, take that from maybe 15 months, you know, maybe down to 10, 11 months.
And that's a pretty substantial change with something like that.
You know, if you can increase it by 25%, that's a pretty big deal.
And I think one of the things we've already touched on it, but that's very important, is not only does it make the products available, the nutrients, but it helps keep them available for a long period of time so they don't just re-tie back up with something that we don't want.
Absolutely right.
Perfect. Well, thanks for your time today, guys. If you have any more questions about anything we talked about today, call your local REDSTAR rep.